The San Francisco 49ers go into Philadelphia on wild card weekend and get the win 23-19, but at what cost? All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Behind the Back podcast, 49ers and Eagles postgame edition. This is a rare one for us. We got the matchup. It was a crazy game. There's a lot to break down in this game. I'm feeling good. I'm also upset for reasons we'll talk about. Marcos, you're here with me, brother. I see you've got the red on, representing the team. How are you feeling after that interesting and wild finish of that game?
Me personally, tough way to lose. I think, I don't know how to describe it. It was just like every other Eagles game that we saw all year long. But, me personally, I feel okay. This taught me, showed me what this Eagles team was really about this year and the story of the Philadelphia Eagles that never changed. But you know what? This hopefully, the signals that change is coming. And we'll talk a little bit about what, this loss could mean for Philadelphia. But before we do, we got to talk about, obviously, wearing the Niners jersey here in honor of the champion here, of the winner. 0-2 over here, again, in the BTB Bowl. So, Ben, I'll let you take away. What are your initial thoughts coming off of the victory? How are you feeling, going into, coming off of this one?
This was, very indicative of how the season has been for the 49ers. They had another crazy injury, right, in George Kittle, and we'll talk about that. And it was just another thing for this team to overcome. And, in enemy territory, in what was a loud environment, a toxic environment in a lot of ways. Shout out Eagles fans for always being the most gracious of hosts. This was a wild game for the 49ers and a very emotional one. And then they once again kind of found a way to win. And that's been the theme this year for the 49ers. Like it's really wild to see. So many times in the past, you've seen this 49ers team have a starting quarterback go down and their season's over. Have a star defensive player go down and their season's over. So on and so forth. And this year it's been that case 4 different times, and yet their season is still alive going into the divisional round. So, my real thoughts on this game just right now is in a lot of ways shock. When Kittle went down, I think this is a good way to kind of start our conversation. I think both of us felt like that game was shifting, right? I know the play right after Kittle going down was a big one out to DeMarcus Robinson for a big gain, but you felt a lot of the wind in the sails for the 49ers kind of go out the door, especially when you come back from the break. You see Kittle, getting carted off. He's being kind of consoled by his teammates. It was tough to see. It was something we're all too familiar with this year. So you felt like the sails were out of it, but things didn't necessarily go south for the 49ers. And I think that was, from our side of things, the biggest takeaway is that they were able to overcome that early adversity.
Yeah, and I think, listen, like I remember texting you, once that happened, or a few, 5 minutes after it happened. I was like, the energy of this game is like gone. It's different. It sucks because you wanted to see Kittle out there. You wanted to see everybody out there that you had, playing the game and trying to make plays. But sucks to see Kittle go down. We hope for. I mean, we already know what it is. It's a torn Achilles, and it was just tough. Non-contact. It just was a really rough spot to see a guy like Kittle go down. And I know we'll talk about what this could mean and potential fixes or what's coming down the pipeline for the Niners. But I got to give you guys credit. Again, you figured out a way in adversity when the Eagles really had a lot of things going their way. Like I know the Eagles had a lot of penalties going against them. Like the Eagles were getting in their own way. They had 7 penalties for 48 yards. You guys only had 1 penalty in this game. You guys did the little things when the other little things were going against it. Like the Eagles punted a lot in this game and got some really good field position off of that. Morstead biffed a couple punts because of the wind. Like the Eagles were getting opportunity after opportunity and refused to convert. And the Niners were, despite some up and down play, were always right there in the fight. And when it came down to the end, stood tall. So I got to give you guys credit. It was a really good game.
Yeah, that was a big one for me. We texted about it, talking about how it was kind of an undisciplined showing from the Eagles. It's been kind of per the course in a lot of ways for how the Eagles season's gone. And then the 49ers playing a really disciplined game. And I mean, even the one penalty they have was questionable. We don't have to dive into it, um but this was a big thing for why the 49ers were able to get the win in Philadelphia. I think from a discipline standpoint and being able to just go out there, trust your game plan, trust your guys to, each guy to just make the right play and not let the emotions overrun them, not let certain things get, out of hand is how you keep a team in front of you. And, let's be real, this is an offense this year under Patullo that was extremely easy to stop because it stops itself more often than anything. This 49ers defense is now going to go into Seattle next week to a team who has close to as many weapons. I think their quarterback isn't nearly as good as Jalen. But this is an offense that has weapons and a coordinator that is a little more, up to the task. And they've also seen the 49ers. Now, mind you, Seattle put up 13 points last time. We'll see what that looks like. I don't think the 49ers are putting up 3. I really don't. And I think having Trent and back in this one was a big gain. So the discipline thing from both sides, that was a big turning point for both of our teams. The time of possession, this is one thing I wanted to kind of talk about because this is the Eagles have been, when they have the good drives, they've been methodical. You guys had a 9-minute drive in the first quarter, or at least the first half, that really you started dominating that possession time early, and that was a concern. It was like, if my defense, the 49ers defense, is going to be out there for an extended period of time, this is a defense that has been beaten up on pretty much for the past 3 weeks now, 4 weeks, I think, going back to the Bears game, right? So it's tough to see how this defense going up against, a 2-week rested offense would be able to stick with it. And I think when you look at it, Philly ending with 35 minutes of time of possession and the 49ers ending with 24, it's surprising to see the Niners, have the result they did. But I think it's the splash plays, right?
Yeah, the Niners capitalized on a lot of big opportunities early and often. I mean, obviously the Demarcus Robinson play. I mean, his play in general was awesome. But I mean, on the Eagles side of things, it sucks because Saquon had 106 yards, so he broke off a few runs, right? But it was inconsistent, and this was the story of the Eagles all year. And against the Niners defense that struggles to stop the run, again, the numbers say Saquon did fine, but there was plenty more opportunities to be had there, and you guys stuffed him a lot in this game. And I think that the Eagles are so content on doing what they stuck with all year, run, and then try and convert on a 3rd and long. And I mean, on 3rd down, we were 5 of 16. So it really wasn't a good, stretch of play for us. And not to mention, like, yes, the time of possession was important, but then we got in our own way by not being able to finish. And we missed an extra point early on that set the stage after the first touchdown. That drive where we started off on like the 5-yard line, and that was that 9-minute drive you were talking about, where we went up all the way down the field, and we're like, okay, we look fine. We got aided by a penalty here, or no, it wasn't a penalty, but there was something that helped us out. I forget exactly what it was at that time, but I think that the Eagles did what they did all year, where they had good stretches and then they totally disappeared. I think to start, they went like 0 for 5, 5 straight 3-and-outs from the end of the first half to the, for the first few possessions of the, second half. And I just think that they kept you guys in it the whole time. And it was Jalen, I think, did fine, but they didn't do anything impressive. The play calling was tough. I mean, the Eagles didn't really do anything until they had to. And at the very end, they had the opportunities, and then they just weren't able to convert when it mattered most. And I think that you guys, again, just stuck with it. And I was really, this felt like a game the Eagles didn't deserve to win. Like, it was, they were playing not up to their standards, and they were playing conservatively. Play calling was conservative. There's just, and not to mention star players like AJ Brown complaining he had that spat with Sirianni that they caught. They're yelling at each other, and then AJ proceeds to drop multiple balls after starting stuff. So it's just one of those things where, like, this team has been defined by all this drama, all this outside noise, and now we're at this place where we can address it. And I think that comes with a lot of changes this year, and I won't in the offseason, and I won't be surprised if Patullo and AJ Brown are gone.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about that driving over to the BTB studio. Like, I think AJ's odds of being on this team next year are slim, and I think it's even more slim to think that Patullo will be here next year. I think it's really a matter of days that we see the tweet come out that they've moved on from Patullo. And look, the reality is two things. You guys won the Super Bowl last year. Your window's not closed as long as you have the guy you have behind, QB1. And as long as you guys have Vic Fangio and that defense, your window's still open. It's not like the 49ers situation where we're lacking all this wide receiver depth and so on and so forth. Like, you guys still have options, and you got draft capital to utilize. So that can be true while also there being options for offensive coordinators out there. So I think there's an opportunity here for the Eagles to this offseason really, I talked about a rebuild or a retool. I think a similar word can be said when talking about this Eagles team. You don't need to do the kind of retool that the 49ers did where you clear shop, you go deep in the draft, you go deep in free agency, so on. And I don't think it needs to be that deep, but you get deep enough in it and you're going to set yourself up for another opportunity next year.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of avenues the Eagles are going to try and take, and they have a lot of questions to answer this offseason. Are they going to keep Jalen Phillips? Who are they going to pay? That's always going to be a question. And again, there's a litany of offensive coordinator options now that the season's starting to come to the end and more options are opening. Coaches are getting fired left and right. So this, it feels like down the pipeline it's just going to be Howie taking the reins and trying to get a new guy in the building. But we'll see what's reported. We'll see what they say. I'm sure what they'll say at first is that we're going to ride with Kevin and see what happens. At least Sirianni will. In public, we'll see what's reported. We're recording this like an hour after the game, so not much is out yet. So we'll see what they say about it, but I would be surprised if Patullo comes back next year. And AJ Brown, we'll see what happens with him. We'll see what kind of trade package teams would be willing to offer for him, and we'll see if he ends up being a part of the future. It would suck that this would be the way that the AJ Brown era ends. He was such a dominant receiver. I mean, another 1,000-yard season, and in what was a down year for the offense, I think that the pieces, the guys, the leaders are still in place for Philly to continue to build this team. I just think like this run, it's gotten stale and it needs to, rebuild itself a bit. But I do think that for you guys, I kind of want to talk about what you, kind of how you're feeling now that this game is over. You guys got an awesome win. I want to talk about a part of that game that, I felt like as soon as that, this play happened, that it felt like the tide was going to go in your favor. And that was the trick play that got you guys back in the game to take the lead 17-16. I believe that's what it was. So from your point of view, tell me about the play, and what you were thinking when that play was going on.
Well, it was wild because that was the very beginning of the fourth quarter. And I talked about in the episode this week, the main episode, that I wanted to see Kyle Shanahan coach to win a football game versus coach to not lose the football game. And I think this is a perfect example of Kyle Shanahan coaching to win a football game. This is, Kyle kind of after the game, he talked about this. He was asked about this play, and he said, Clay Kubiak was actually the one who came to me with the idea of running this play in that moment. And I was the one who was like, yeah, let's do it. Like, let's go for it. And so I just think from that standpoint, the 49ers understood that they need to make a splash here. You need to put more than just 3 points on the board. Obviously, you need to go make a touchdown play of some sort. And in a moment like that, it's a good opportunity coming out of a little bit of a break. You get a little bit of time to talk about it, to discuss things, and then you go for it. And I mean, Juwan Jennings, Juwan was coming out of high school. He had a higher QBR than Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow. So this is a guy who has played the quarterback position. He's thrown the football before. We've seen him do it. We saw it as late as the Super Bowl. That was the last time we saw it when he threw that basically lateral pass opposite side of the field to CMC, who ran it in for the touchdown. And we've seen it prior to, against the Rams. So this is that play in particular, rather, we've seen against the Rams. I don't think Juwan was part of it, but Juwan having the guts to make that play with Jalen Carter barreling down on his face like that and hit him hard. And I mean, I was kind of laughing because they showed the replay and then you see the slow-mo of Jalen Carter. He's just like smiling because it's like that was kind of crazy. Like I hit him and he's still able to make that play. It was a wild moment for me. And it was a tide shifter because prior to that, your defense was suffocating the 49ers offense for the most part. Yeah, we had kind of gotten some yards even on that drive. But Purdy had thrown the picks. Or at least, I don't know if he he had thrown the second pick already. So there was concern that like, were you going to be able to, avoid the ghosts of Eagles past and make the right reads and so on. And I'll get to Purdy later on, but like, it was a big moment, and I think it was the ultimate shifter in this game for the 49ers where it was like, we really can go win this thing because if a play like that is working, it means that we've got something going here. So it was huge, big moment.
Yeah, and I think that was an underrated portion of this game. Like the Eagles D line, they were getting pressure. Like you could see on, I'm sure their pressure stats will say that they were able to get pressure on Purdy, but they only ended up with one sack. And Purdy avoided the back-breaking plays. A lot of those backwards plays, you didn't really get a lot of those in this game. You avoided a lot of the negative outside of the interceptions, and I think that the defense overall for you guys did a good job. But the Eagles defense, I think, did their part-ish, and I think, Kyle Shanahan, this was the, they had referenced Kyle Shanahan, Vic Fangio, their matchups before, but this was kind of their first modern-day matchup with both units that they were calling being elite at what they do. And this round went to Shanahan. I think Shanahan was, yes, it was a little inconsistent and he got the interceptions, but he was able to generate big play after big play after big play. And I think that, if the Eagles had gotten home just a couple more times, it could have been the difference in this game. Or I know that they batted down a few balls. If they got a few more, it could have been the difference in this game. And I gotta give Purdy for fighting through, that adversity. And I know you'll, talk about him and what he did. But I think that this was a great game by Shanahan and Saleh. They, the Eagles got outcoached in this game. And I know that the Niners, and it didn't feel that way going into the second half because you guys didn't end the first half well. It ended with that fumble. Purdy, they were running out of time. They ran a great play, and Purdy was trying to get out of bounds, and it fumbled out of bounds. So that ran the clock, and that was kind of a loss of points there when you had an opportunity to get points, and it just didn't feel good going into the third. But then you guys responded, and the Eagles just shot the bed, and that's just how this game ended up working out. And I just frustrating. And, I don't want to talk too much about the Eagles because I'll do this during the week. I'll kind of give them a grade, talk a little bit more about, what I really saw from this game. And I thought that there was good moments. Obviously, the Eagles had opportunities in this game, but they also could have lost by more. I mean, if Upton Stout got that pick six early on in the game, it could have been different. So the Eagles got away with stuff in this game, and normally they win in this spot because they did a good job. It wasn't like you guys dominated in yards. We dominated time of possession. Like we controlled a lot of the game, but we were sloppy and we weren't able to execute when it mattered, even though Jalen had an opportunity at the end there. So that's just kind of my takeaways.
Yeah, and I mean, so many things like from the penalties to the missed opportunities and so on. All that adding up, you still had a chance to win the game at the very end, And I think the very end boiled down not to player execution; it boiled down to Saleh versus Patullo. And I think most people are going to take Saleh in that situation. The red zone situation, you're probably taking him. So, you mentioned Brock Purdy. I want to talk a little bit about him, and then we can kind of shift towards closing this thing out and getting on with it. But Brock Purdy in this one. So you mentioned the fumble to close the half. That killed me. That killed me, bro, because the 49ers, they gave themselves an opportunity to put points on the board there. And it was down to the last second, and it was like Purdy gets down, and there's like, okay, was there actually time on the clock? And it's like, okay, yeah, there was time on the clock. Then the question comes up, it's like, Did he fumble that ball? And did he fumble that out of bounds? And is that a 10-second runoff? Yes, the heck it is. Let's go to the locker room. It's halftime. Eagles get the ball coming out. And you're still down 3. So, there was a few missed opportunities just in that first half. To shift real quick, Upton missing that pick 6, what would have been at the very least a pick. That's a big one. And then, the Purdy thing where you could have tied it up, had a little bit more momentum going in. Shanahan did say he was happy with where the 49ers were at halftime, and I agree. I think they were in a position where they could take the ball game. But when you look at the statistics of a Shanahan-led team when losing at halftime, it's not favorable either. So Purdy in general, though, going back to Purds, to throw those 2 picks, bad picks, bad balls. I think wind was a factor, at least on the second one, because Tom had a great breakdown. I'm not sure if you caught that. Yeah. So he talked about with the air under the ball and the angle at which you want to release. I thought that was fantastic. One of the few things that you can get from somebody like that being in a position he was in. So I thought that was fantastic. But that part of it was a lot of the reason why Purdy threw at least that second pick. Shout out Q for being ready, staying ready. It was a great play all around from Quinion. I think he was absolutely ready for that moment. But Purdy, to be able to come out after throwing those 2 picks, continue to trust his reads, go through his progression in a hostile environment with cards stacked against you, lead a game-winning drive like that. And, I think, we kind of text each other occasionally and say, quote unquote, legacy drives for X quarterback. I think this was a Purdy legacy drive. Did he play a fantastic game today? No. This wasn't the best showing from Brock. Finished 18 of 31 through the air, 262 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, took a sack, finished with a rating of 80. Wasn't the best game. But what do you and I talk about the most? It's making the plays when it matters the most and getting the win. I mean, QB wins is the most important stat in a lot of ways. And Purdy was able to go out there and get the win and lead his team down the field with, his star wide receiver being Demarcus Robinson today. So I love what I saw from Brock. He's got another tough test next week against the Seattle defense, who's similar in a lot of ways as we talked about, but it's going to be a big test for him. So I do love what I saw from Brock in this game.
No, I gotta give him his flowers. He extended plays. He gave you guys an opportunity to win the game, even though even when he was even when the ball didn't go his way and he got those turnovers. And I gotta give him credit, because it's gonna come to a point that, let's say, if he's making it to the Super Bowl this year, that would have mean that he won his next 2 games, which would put him over Jalen Hurts in playoff wins, because he now is at 5 and Jalen is at 6. Yeah. So Purdy has the opportunity, and this is where Niners fans who like Purdy, who are confident in Purdy like yourself, should feel confident in him, because he's continuing to show that he can win, and he won in a hostile environment where the cards are stacked against him with a team that isn't at full strength, and he was asked to not mess it up, and he won the game for you guys in a way. So I think that it's just more evidence for those who, if you're doubting Purdy, he can step up, and this is still a reason why you can't sleep on the Niners. Even if you want to say we can't ignore what we saw Week 18, this is still why you can't count out the Niners. And I think that next week is going to be a challenge for you guys. But the Eagles, weren't able to capitalize on the opportunities that they were given in this game, and I think the Niners can force other teams, the remaining teams left here. On the bracket too, they can force those mistakes out of those teams, and it does help you guys a bit in a weird way, that it is going to most likely end up just being your division that you're going through to get there. And I mean, that's a familiarity on both sides, and I just think that it provides a unique experience. So I got to give Brock his credit. He won the day. He's won his past 2 games against Jalen Hurts, or he's 2-0 in games that he started and finished against Jalen Hurts, which matters. So, we do that. We like to throw that stat for Jalen, so it matters here for Purdy. So I got to give him his flowers. He's been the better quarterback here. So yeah, great job by Purdy. So I wanted to ask you too, what's your confidence level? I know that, you took blows. The teams took blows with the injuries and everything. But how confident are you that you can go in there next week? Kind of like a little mini preview of how you're feeling at this moment.
I feel damn good. But, how I started this thing off was saying that this team's got a tremendous amount of heart. This is a team that has gone through so much this year. This is a team full of heart to a level I've probably can't recall ever seeing. Just everything is consistently stacked against them, underdogs in countless games, and they found ways to win. And I think Shanahan is coaching his best season ever in his coaching career. So I feel really good. And when we did our brackets, our playoff brackets, I took the Niners winning against the Eagles and getting this matchup against Seattle because I wanted it, because I want that rematch, because I know for a fact if we get that second chance against them like we do, that it's going to be different. At the very least, the score is going to be different. And I trust that this team right now, this is a massive win. This is the defending champs. Doesn't matter what happened this season with the defending champs. This is the defending champs. This was familiar territory where they have lost games before. The 49ers have lost games in that stadium before, in big games, and they were able to go in there and get the win. So I feel good going into the Seattle matchup. We'll see how the injuries shake down. This week, the only injuries reported in this one were Jair Brown and George Kittle. But Ronaldo Green had a foot thing at practice right before boarding a plane to over to Philadelphia. So you just never know with this 49ers team. We'll kind of see how it shakes down, but I do feel good. I do have one question for you, though. Did you expect Jalen to use his legs a little bit more in this one? We kind of talked earlier in the season, in the later stage of the season, about is the offense, and is he maybe saving himself or at least saving those style of plays for these big games and when you kind of need them most? Were you a little bit surprised to see him not utilize that elite part of his game more?
In a way, yes, and it's funny because this was a talking point during the week. Was Jalen was asked that question about, oh, now that you have made it to the playoffs, did not running as much during the season help you at all, or do you feel healthier because of it? And he's like, no, I was just doing, what the coach, what the OC was telling me, what Kevin Patullo was telling me to do, and I'm just, trying to execute and run the offense the way I'm being asked to do it. So we kind of threw him a little, it wasn't a positive indictment on Patullo. And I think that there was one big play that Jalen was able to get a first down that got called back on a holding penalty. And I think that Jalen, it was weird. I agree. They didn't take advantage of him as much as I thought they were going to. I did think that it was going to be more of a factor. And it was weird because every time it felt like Jalen was getting a rhythm, they went away from him. And I think, again, Patullo has been on record to say that we will just run the ball just to run the ball. And it's kind of frustrating when you take the ball out of your hot hand and it's not, and it doesn't, it was frustrating. And I get it. Again, Saquon had the numbers, but it was a frustrating day too, because we thought going into this we were going to have Lane Johnson, and that was something that I didn't talk about as much I'm just bringing it up now 30 minutes in, but we didn't, we got told, we thought 12 hours before the game, we hear oh, Lane Johnson's playing. And then they're like, oh, he suffered a setback. He got sprained and now he's questionable, but he should be good to go. Oh, no. And now he's not playing. And that was you guys only got one sack on us. Jalen wasn't pressured. He was sitting comfy in the pocket all game, but that could have affected the run game a little bit more, just overall consistency. And, it was kind of a bummer not having him in there. And I think that it would have made a difference. It could have made enough of a difference to turn the tide. But that was, it was just frustrating that, again, the Eagles had every opportunity, but that's just been them all year. And I can't be mad at it. The records and everything speak for themselves. What they've been doing has been successful. But in the down years of the Eagles, they're still making the playoffs. They're either making it to the Super Bowl or losing in the first round. And the reason they lose in the first round is both years we've had offensive coordinators that were rookies. And I think that there is a weird correlation to a level of the discipline has been an issue because, we're getting way more penalties than we ever have because we're not as put together offensively. Our play calling is limited and we're not utilizing our talent. And it's forcing the talent that we have to want to leave. And it really is a tough spot to be in. So hopefully this offseason we just fix some things, get a real legit play caller back in the building for the offense. It's just going to be Jalen's 11th guy that he gets to go through, and it's just another level of adversity that the Eagles take. But they lost this game. They're 5-1. in home playoff games with Nick Sirianni. He's still a damn good coach. I still believe in him. I still believe in Jalen, and I still believe the foundation is there. Um, so I got to give the Niners credit because they came in here and took it from us, and that really was the story of this game because the Eagles had every opportunity to win this game on both sides of the ball. And the defense was doing their part, I believe. Like, I got to give the defense credit. I know they allowed 361 yards, but again, a lot of big chunk plays. They were stifling Purdy, but Purdy came through in the clutch, and the Eagles weren't able to do the same. So, sucks that Jalen didn't utilize his legs more. But I also think that I don't know how much of a difference that was going to make in that game, and I didn't know how many opportunities they truly had. If they ran him 5 or 6 more times, how that would have worked out. So that's just how I feel about that.
No, that's fair. I mean, I agree with you because the reason I'm asking you is I feel like he had the 5 carries for 14 yards, but they were kind of backbreaking yards because they were big moments where you needed him to get those yards in any way, shape, or form, and he was able to get them. And so from that standpoint, it was like if he does run it, 5 more times and starts to find his vibe. We talked about how you start on the ground with this team. In a perfect scenario, you start on the ground with this team, with both the running backs and with Jalen, get him a couple comfy looks at just getting yards and any positive yards in any way, shape, or form. And he gets comfy and he sits back and he's a great quarterback. But if you run this consistently inconsistent scheme at him and just shoot yourself in the foot in a lot of ways as the offensive coordinator and shoot yourself in that offense, it's not a recipe for success. And like, I could tell you right now, if the 49ers lost this game, I was going to come in and be like, dude, your defense is going to be what wins you a Super Bowl, and your offense is going to be what loses you a Super Bowl. Yeah. And I think that would have been the best takeaway, from that angle of it. But hopefully with Jalen's next 11th coordinator, it's the one that sticks and it's the one that, works the best. Because it's wild. I mean, and it's a shout out and a testament to how good of a quarterback Jalen really is, considering he's always in the conversation of being, is he actually an elite quarterback or not, and so on and so forth. But he's always in that conversation because he's making the plays, he's winning the games, and he's consistently dealing with this swapping of his offensive coordinator. So it's a testament to how good Jalen really is at just going out and being a leader and winning games. So let's do some game balls here. Do you have any game balls?
Yeah, I'm gonna give a couple. I gotta give Quinyon Mitchell a game ball. He's the playoff picker is what I'm gonna give his nickname there because that's his so it's his fourth. That's his fourth. Yeah. He got 2 last year, but he got 2 in this game. Great job by Q. He got smoked early on by Demarcus Robinson. He gave up the big play and gave up the first touchdown. And there was a couple plays early on, but Demarcus Robinson had an awesome game. But I think that, he made big plays and kept the Eagles in it. And I really thought that when he got those interceptions, like in those moments that the offense was like, oh, going to capitalize. So I got to give Quinyon a player of the game. And I also got to give one to Dallas Goedert. He had 4 catches, 33 yards, but he had that 1 rushing touchdown. But he had 2 touchdowns in this game, and he was the safety blanket. Came up in that big, on that last drive, they had that 4th and 11 that it looked like we were dead in the rights midway through, like the 50-yard line, and that was after the A.J. Brown drop, and Jalen was able to get a conversion to Dallas Goedert in a perfect spot. So it's just, Goddard made big plays in this game when it mattered, and, I got to give him credit. And so did Devontae Smith. So I think, those are kind of the guys I want to give credit for. A lot of guys made big plays in this game, but again, it was, too inconsistent, and a lot of guys didn't make enough plays to, warrant getting more game balls. And that's kind of where I'd give it to this go around, and that's a sad way to end the season because I was hoping to, give game balls for guys playing a lot better than what they did today.
Yeah, and I mean, kind of building off that last statement there's only one team that ever ends their season happily, right? And you guys have done that, twice in the last 5 years. So it's, down year, maybe if you want to call it that. I guess you can call it that from a results standpoint, but again, it's a retool year, a retool off season, and you're potentially looking at another run. So, as far as game balls on the 49ers side, I've got a few to give out. First one's going to go to the coaches. And you kind of mentioned it, like this was, the 49ers coaching staff was what won this game in a lot of ways. The Eagles were out coached. And, Robert Saleh had a great scheme, great play calling down the stretch to really ice the game. Shanahan coached to win the football game, and that was really what I asked him for. I said, like, coach to win the game, even if it means you lose the game. That's what I'm looking for from him. It's development, because even as good as he is, from an offensive standpoint, he has his flaws, and we've seen that from a head coaching standpoint. And I think in this one he might have overcome somewhat of you would consider like a bugaboo. So I love what I saw there. You can even give a shout out to Clay Kubiak for that great idea and getting a little fancy there in a big moment. So love what I saw from the coaching staff. Special teams was okay on both sides. So I don't have a ton on that. And yeah, that's where I'd hand that first game ball to on the coaching staff. Second one's going to go to Juwan Jennings. I mean, passer rating of 158.3 and a touchdown, and 45 yards of receiving, yelling at Kendrick Bourne to lock in there down the stretch. He was a voice on the field and a player who made impact plays tonight. And, whether the stat sheet is completely full or not, like a Demarcus Robinson standpoint, I think he's one of the 49er veteran leaders out there that you could rely on down the stretch when you don't have a guy like George Kittle. So I liked what I saw from Juwan. And last game ball is going to go to, believe it or not, a linebacker, Eric Kendricks. I mean, we talked about kind of how banged up that unit was going into this game. I mean, 4 guys available at linebacker position going in, 4 guys who haven't had hardly any, runs this season at that position. And Kendricks finished with 10 tackles, and he made awesome reads, had great pre-play developments. I saw him multiple times communicating and kind of calling things out down the stretch. And I think that he was really important from a defensive standpoint for this 49ers team. So those are the game balls. My shout outs would be like a Marquez Siegel for stepping in for Jair Brown. He had some really good plays. Offensive line, I really could give him a game ball. I'm only giving the 3 game balls, but that offensive line handling the pass rush of the Eagles, I know that it's been up and down this year, but like nonetheless, there are guys who make plays on the defensive line, and they kept Purdy pretty safe, pretty comfy for the majority of the game. So I loved what I saw there. Shout out Trent Williams for making it back. And then, the Demarcus Robinson game. So that's where I'm going to finish up my breakdown on that team.
Heck yeah, dude. So yeah, again, congratulations on the win. This was a great game. I knew, all the playoffs, games so far this season have been incredible. And I hope that trend continues as we go forward. But I want to get, just some final thoughts. I think that, if I had to say anything on the Eagles, I'm going to give them a grade after I sit on, just think about this game for the next few days here and give them my grade for the season during the week. But I do think that, all in all, I kind of anticipated something like this happening. I wish it wasn't the first round, but I do think that, in a year that we could have went back to back, it's a little bit disappointing. But I do, we won last year, so personally speaking, it's, okay. And I do think that we will get another opportunity next year. I don't think that there's just going to be some like elite juggernaut team waiting on the other side next year, like what the Chiefs have been for the past like 5 years to teams. So I think that the Eagles will have the opportunity to come back next year. It's going to look a lot different. Hopefully, that's my hope, is that it looks different. And I think that'll be a good thing for this team. But, shout out to you guys for ending our season early and coming into our house and taking care of business. That's, got to give it to y'all. Bang, bang, Niner gang. We're going to be rocking with them all the way through here on BTB. So what are some final thoughts for you coming off of an awesome win?
Just stoked. I'm ready to start talking about Seattle going into this week. And we're going to do the main episode as always. I shouldn't say as always, because we had some breaks there, but we will be here this week. We will be talking about that game. It's a big game. There are big games all this week. We'll also talk about the matchups of this week. We'll do a quick, who we think is going to win and who we think is going to lose. And it's been a crazy weekend. Football games have been fantastic. I mean, really good watches, everything coming down to the very end. No blowouts. Yeah. This has been a fun wild card weekend. At least from my perspective. I know it's a down year for you, or a down game and down situation, but you know, the bounce back is what matters. So guys, appreciate you guys as always for listening. This has been the Behind the Back podcast post game edition for the both of our teams. This was the first one we've done together, so that was exciting. That was fun. And fun to kind of get the different perspectives on it. Give us a like, comment, subscribe, guys. Let us know what your guys' thoughts on the game were. You know, were you surprised that the 49ers went in there and handed it to the birds, cooked some birds, even though that would be highly illegal because the Eagles are something you can't touch in America. So let us know your thoughts, guys. Appreciate you as always for listening. All the links to our socials are down below. You can hit us up at behindthebackpod13@gmail.com. Send us an email. As always, guys, I am Ben the Jet Retz, and beside me here is
Marcos Conan Negron, everybody. Good game, Benny. I appreciate it. You know, good luck next week. We're rooting for the Niners all the way, baby.
Yes, sir. All right. We'll see you guys next week. Peace.